Welcome to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset, the leading data and analytics company for the cannabis industry.
So, Emily, we talk a lot about New York cannabis legalization these days. Some big news came out today with Tilray and New York. I'm not sure if you saw this, but Tilray is investing in New York, but might not be exactly what you think. They're actually, or maybe it would be what you think. They're buying another brewery. So they're expanding their beer empire by purchasing Montauk Brewery. So I think this is the second brewery under their belt. And I know we've covered that in the past, this idea that what is Tilray? Are they a cannabis brand? Are they an alcohol brand? Do they have to be one or the other? It was an interesting headline. Cannabis company in New York, just a little bit different than I would have expected.
It is an interesting angle, and I've actually been to Montauk Brewery. It's very cute, and they have very nice beer. And I did see that they call this accretive a few times in the press release, but there were few details. There were notes about top line growth and potential margin improvement. I believe Tilray's adjusted EBITDA is around 8%, so maybe we could see some improvement. But there was one thing that I was really curious to dig in on, because I've been tracking what is going on with Bev-Alc sales, and especially around millennials and Gen Z. But regardless, in digging in on the trends around beer sales, it seems as though the craft beer category sales are down 7.7% through June 12th of 2022. And that comes from the research firm IRI. And craft beer's dollar sales decline was much greater than the overall segment. General beer sales have been down 2.2% through that same period. And I know you and I have talked about hard seltzer on the show. That's been down 8% through June 2022. And then don't even get me started on the ready to drink alcohol options, which was down 20%, really. But I was also looking at, I do follow some wholesaling trends around beer. And through the summer, actually through August, they saw a decline across the wholesaling of beer, which for summer months is not a good indicator. And I was reading a little bit about it, and they were talking too about, sales are going down in terms of volume through the wholesale, but they're also talking about how they're going to have to increase prices around these products because of the input costs, the wage labor costs that have gone up. But they still don't think that that's going to show growth across the sales of the industry. So I thought it was interesting, because you and I have talked about the decreasing price of cannabis, and yet that unit sales are kind of holding steady in the industry. This is seeing an absolute decline across the category, and an even sharper one in craft beer, which is exactly what Montauk Brewing is. So a little bit of an interesting move, considering the trends we've been tracking around alcohol and what comes next. But it seems like they are concerned about what they're experiencing in Canada. So this is yet another way that they're trying to reach into the US. I know they talked about plugging in, as you pointed out, to that other beer company to plug this, because this company is largely distributed through New York State or the tri-state area in the Northeast. And I think they're trying to leverage their existing distribution to expand that. But nonetheless, from a category standpoint, it's just something to watch, and it'll be interesting to see what happens next.
Yeah. And, the beer, those metrics are pretty interesting, especially now that we're in November and things don't seem to be looking up. A lot of talk about recession next year, and everyone points to alcohol. Everyone points to beer as back in 2008, 2009 was pretty recession proof. But I'm not sure if that was the case for like craft. It might have been for like the cheaper stuff, just as people have less purchasing power, right? Or they don't want to spend less on things. So yeah, I don't know if these numbers are going to get any better.
Yeah, I mean, the last time we went through this, 2020 was an aberration, and everyone agrees about that, because we were all staying home. People were getting checks. I didn't get any checks, but people got checks, and then they were using it to buy alcohol and hang around at home. We've talked about being home being good for cannabis for sure, because you can't get cannabis really at a bar unless you're in Nashville, apparently. But I think it's just an interesting trend, and in a lot of those recessionary times, there is behavior around people kind of trading down within the category. So yes, they'll stay in the category of beer, but what does it mean? Are they going to trade? Are they going to keep going after the very expensive 4-packs of of craft beer, or are they going to kind of trade down a little bit to maybe a more mainstream, but still kind of like a specialized beer that's at a better price point because they have a higher volume of transactions? So it'll be interesting to watch what happens next as we go into this holiday season and people are not just feeling the core, but also feeling the experience of having to spend on holiday shopping and hosting people and traveling to be with people, and then what goes into 2023.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of acquisitions, I also want to talk about this. P. Diddy, Sean Combs, Puff Daddy, however you know him, has made a pretty big deal with a purchase of operations in 3 states, New York, Massachusetts, Illinois. Is that right?
That is
for
correct.
$185 million. And he's purchasing the assets of Cresco
and Columbia Care. The split is dependent upon the 3 markets.
Got it. And does this have to do with the opportunity from the upcoming merger with Cresco and Columbia Care and divesting some of those assets as part of the merger?
Yes, that's exactly right. And so these 3 states were the ones that Mr. Combs, or Sean, as some people in the inner circle know him, but Ohio and Florida are still needing to be officially divested. But rumors around the market are that there are buyers for those assets. I mean, I think Ohio and Florida are super interesting markets. It is important to just a couple of things about this. First of all, I'm thrilled to see Puffy in the industry because, first of all, he will be the largest organization run by a person, or with the CEO or leader of a person of color at the helm. So that's pretty exciting for the industry and a trend we need to see moving in a better direction. So yay for that. And he's also stepped up to say that he's planning to create a lot of opportunity around this. So I think that's really good from an equity perspective. Just some things to say about the transaction, though. It is $110 million in cash at closing, $45 million in seller's notes, and there weren't details around the duration or the rate of that, and then $30 million in contingent consideration. And I think that's around what happens in New York State and Illinois in terms of opening up with new licenses, new doors. But New York is a big question mark for a lot of people, and I'm sure that was a big part of this $30 million in contingency that's being held back. So, Matt McGinley from Needham, who's a friend of the show, does point out that the proceeds from this deal might only net $87 million at closing. And so that's a little tricky because there is $140 million in Columbia Care debt. And so that has to be reconciled, as well as the closing costs around integration. And just as a point of reference, $47 million was what the True Leaf Harvest integration costs amounted to. Now, that was a different flavor of a transaction, but these things are expensive. And so it will be interesting to see what they get for the Ohio and Florida assets to help cover this and what will happen next. But I know that this group is I'm very happy to have this group in the industry, happy to have him in the industry. He has an experience around Ciroc vodka. He also has a tequila brand, and they've done other things in more consumer space. So I think it'll be good to have this group as a part of the industry.
Any sense on timing with this, when this might happen?
I think they're marching ahead, but I think on the transaction now they're looking at 1Q 2023 for the Curaleaf Cresco. But as far as this getting done and these assets officially pulled into this, there's these things, and there's getting to definitives, and then there's the actual transfer of the license. And so I'm sure there's contingencies around that as well from the approval of the state lawmakers. But that's the thing about these deals, is there are usually multiple steps before you actually have it all under one umbrella and are running it. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, very interesting, very exciting, very complicated, I'm sure, to get this thing through, especially as Cresco and Columbia Care are doing their own thing. And now they've got this happening at the same time. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work, but I'm really excited to see this go through. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's election day today. Hopefully you voted.
I did. Yeah, vote day.
Mm-hmm. All right, there we go. Well, I wanted to talk about it because we'll see how it plays out, and some things that really matter to the cannabis industry are on the ballot. And I think it's starting with the Senate and the House, right? So that's, obviously what everyone is always hearing about. That's probably what everyone's sick of talking about, but we're almost there. Hopefully we'll know by the end of the day today when you're listening to this how it went. But projections aren't looking super good for the Democrats when it comes to the Senate. 538, which is, well known for tracking polls and building models around this thing that sometimes accurate, sometimes not accurate, really dependent on the polling that comes through. Ran a bunch of scenarios, and they have Republicans winning the Senate, in a sample of 56 out of 100 scenarios. And it's a bit worse in the House. So House is favored to go Republican in 84 of 100 scenarios. So the caveat to all this is, the polling and who knows, and both sides could be underrepresented. This has happened in the past presidential elections. But, I just want to talk about it, briefly, what does it look like, right? If there is a red wave, we've been sitting in an administration or a legislative branch that's blue, right? And on both sides, by slim margin in the Senate. Yet we really haven't seen much progress. We've seen a lot of talk, and a lot of work, I'm sure, put towards these things like the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act that we've covered to death that, ultimately didn't really have much of a chance. Now, there's still the lame duck session and there's plenty of rumors about, things that could happen during this period, but it's a tight period. And then come, January, when the administration switches over, these new people get voted in, what does it look like? The cynic in me is kind of like not much different than today because, not much has happened in the legislative branch, in a time, I think the last 2 years, I was pretty damn optimistic. I'll say 2 years ago, I was really excited, right? Watching this thing happen, watching the Senate go blue, by the seat of our pants here. And, here we are 2 years later and really not much. And, it's a bit disappointing. Now, so in that sense, I'm at least this time I'm not as optimistic and I don't have as much to be disappointed about. Now I only have an opportunity to be surprised, right? To be surprised by, maybe we have a mix, maybe the Senate stays blue and the House is red. Maybe there's a dynamic there that works out. Maybe they're both red. Maybe something happens, but any thoughts on your side, like good or bad? It is what it is.
Ooh, I don't have a lot of clear party affiliation at this point. I'm kind of like adrift because I don't feel like I'm represented well by anybody at this point. And so I'm kind of just watching it to see how it unwinds or, how it plays out tomorrow. Because I have no sense for how this is going to land. And to your exact point, even so, once it lands, what does that matter? Right. When people, it was funny because back when, so when was the last one? It's all merging together. Anyway, when the blue wave, a couple of years ago, when the blue, quote unquote, blue wave happened, I was not one of the people that was like, bam, this is going to be in the bag. I mean, I was excited because people were excited and it's nice to see the industry responding and people responding positively to that. But I did not have that same notion that it was in the bag, but I have been dazzled by the lack of action and actually getting things done. Considering that this issue had been considered more of a blue issue. Now we both know that it is very much it's across the party lines an issue. It's just whether or not the politicians will represent the people who vote them into office on this issue. And that's really where the disconnect comes. So I don't know how it's going to end up, but I'm going to be watching for sure. And I think there's going to be some really tough races out there to see what happens across the states.
Yeah.
With the Congress people that are running.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I know, a lot of this is bigger than cannabis, but definitely I'm in the same boat. I might have been one of those that when it went blue was pretty excited just from hey, you're saying there's a chance. And then just to be constantly disappointed, like all of us, is a bit challenging. So at least this time, if it goes like a red wave, the expectations are lower, right? So if anything happens post lame duck session, then it's just a positive thing versus kind of the other way around, where expectations are so much higher because it was so talked about, presidential election, everything, right? And then it's just been put by the wayside until a month ago from Biden, and then all the chatter in the legislative branch.
The one lesson from history, which we were talking about before the show, is that alcohol prohibition ended and the tax revenue from alcohol was used to fund the New Deal. So no matter what happens in this election, we're going to be in an interesting economic climate in 2023, or maybe not. Who the heck knows? Maybe it'll bounce back. But given the layoffs that are happening and pretty high paying white collar jobs, I think we're about to see a total shift around in in how this is all. And I don't get the feeling that anybody was, I mean, I know savings were at all-time highs, but I've been watching that drop off a cliff for the last 2 months as credit card debt is soaring. So, I think it's going to be an interesting time, but I can't help but think there could be other externalities that drive more movement on this issue, whether or not, who care, whatever the color of the House and the Senate.
Yeah, agree. And, that might start at the states. And that's what I want to talk about, the states, right? Because that's where it's all happening all the time. And a lot of times that's happening because of taxation and the opportunity to bring some money in and take that money away from the illicit market. So there are a number of states with legalization on the ballot today. So I thought we'd run through those, starting with Missouri. Missouri's got Amendment 3. And this one's actually looking pretty good. The polling has it at over a 60% chance to pass. What's really exciting about Missouri here is that sales could start as soon as February 2023. So should they legalize, you could buy adult use cannabis 2023 because they're going to take the dispensaries and they're going to give them licenses. They're going to be the first ones to, sell legally. I think this is great. I think that this model, maybe it's just the fatigue with things like New York, as we were talking at the top of the podcast, we're always talking about New York and we're still waiting on New York. And, you've got brands in New York now that are, getting into New York from California illicitly. And this is all happening because they just haven't built the framework, right? Years later, right? So I love this idea of like it passes and it's legal pretty quickly. I looked up some data around this, around their medical markets. Cumulative sales to date in October, 530 million. That's like all time. If you just add up every dollar that's been spent in medical cannabis in Missouri, October was about 35 million in sales, which is pretty good. Puts it on almost a $500 million run rate right now. And that's because they've got a lot of dispensaries. I think around 200. As of April, it was 188, plans to open 200 past then. I'm not sure how many are actually open, but that's a fair amount, right? And you compare that to an adult use market like Illinois, right around the corner, that has a lot less than that. So this could be a pretty exciting space. And the geography is pretty interesting too, right? Because you have population in St. Louis, it's really close to Illinois. So yeah, a lot of neighboring states there. We'll see. I don't know.
But half of Kansas City.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
Which is a cool city. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's neat. But, they've been looking, right over the border at Illinois, raking in the revenue on this is just another example. But yeah, so I think this one seems like it could happen and is ready to happen. But to your point, it'll be interesting with all of the doors that already exist, what it'll look like. It's not a market. I'll say this from an investment standpoint. I haven't been clamoring to get into it.
Into Missouri.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. But, I think it's going to need to settle into its new structure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the dispensaries will get the licenses from there. What does it look like? There's a lot, but at least we don't have to wait. Things will be moving quickly. And the next one that we talk about is Maryland. So this is a massive market.
It's a big one.
It really is. And this one is the most likely to pass. In polling, 3 out of 4 voters said that they were for it. But on a timing front, we're going to have to wait a while, right? No legal sales until 2025. There's some other weirdness on the timing too. I don't know if you looked at the legislation with the way it's written, but if it passes, it's still illegal. So possession of small amounts of cannabis would be a civil offense starting on January 1, 2023, punishable by, fines. So you're in a world where, you've passed adult use, but if you're possessing up to an ounce, you're going to have a, $100 fine. So it's kind of like decrim, even though it's legal. But then the legalization of just possession doesn't kick in for like another 6 months post legalization. So that's kind of weird. And then, you've got 2 years for them to get the program in line. And I don't know, I'm just getting so impatient because, there's so many states to look to now, especially with adult use. We've got 19 states in DC, right? There's 20 places you can look and pick and choose and develop a program, and to need 2 years to do it. And then after 2 years, it's going to be a total disaster and they're going to need 5 years to sort it out. It's like, just let's get on with the show here. You've already got medical. I don't know. It's looking good, like it's going to happen, but it's going to take some time.
Well, maybe it'll pass and then the pressure will get on. I wondered when I saw that thing about the possession too, which I don't agree with, but I wondered if they were looking at what happened in New York and they thought this is a way to avoid the market from running ahead of when they get it open. But so
Yeah.
then to your point, just get it open.
Just get it open.
You
right?
have 19 states to look at on adult use. You've got 36 other medical states to look at for, well, they're already medical, but whatever. You get my point. Use the information that is available to you.
Exactly. And, since we talk about data on the podcast, I was looking at the dispensary sales data published from Maryland on total sales, and their sales are declining significantly. October was the worst month for them in dispensary sales all year at 38 million. You contrast that with like March, 46 million was the peak, and it's just been on a decline. So going from July, it was 43 million, August 41, September 40 and a half, and then October 38.4. So it's just like slowly, yeah. And what do you think it is? I was thinking maybe DC, because DC opened up, right? You know, the whole thing, like if you want to self-register.
Self-diagnose.
Yeah, self-diagnose, self-register. You can go and do a dispensary in DC.
Yeah.
And there might be a lot of people kind of moving there. New Jersey also pretty close. Although I don't know, like geography, New Jersey has a limited number of stores right now. And I don't know South Jersey coverage, but could that be it? What's happening? Why are the sales going down so much?
You know, people slow down in getting medical okay, I think you're right about both of those things. There's probably cannibalization of the market, but I think during the times leading up to adult use, you see a decline, although it should happen after it passes. But I have seen a decline in, medical card procurement and those sorts of things. So then it can lead to, well, it stagnates the growth. I wonder, prices are down, maybe. By the way, did you see there's going to be a record Croptober this year because of the conditions and the lack of fires? Anyway, that's a sidebar. But all these states should just, if they're going to get open, they should get open because the cannabis is coming. So get it open.
Yeah.
No, I do think it's interesting. I think there absolutely is probably cannibalization going on.
Yeah.
Is that a word? Cannibalization? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So
okay, let's keep rocking.
It's because you're vegan. You're not, cannibal. Eating other people.
Yeah, no, I'm not a vegetable eating other vegetables.
Yeah. So we'll see. But, with dispensary sales going down like that, taking 2 years to build a framework, like do what Missouri's going to do, right? And just let your dispensary sell adult use and have it, regulated through those channels. Because even, after that 6-month window where it's decrimmed within the first 6 months, you're paying $100 when you get ticketed. But beyond that, it's going to be the Wild West again, right? So, for another, 18 months before these things even open, it's a long time for the illicit market to thrive. Anyways, just big missed opportunity there. And I don't know why these states continue to do that. Especially given, how well it's polling and how it's actually going to be happening. A state that might be happening is Arkansas. Arkansas was tracking pretty well for a while, and then it's not looking great. Polling's flipped. It's really like, early on in September, it was 60% of voters in the state were in support. That's flipped in October. Now only 50% are in support. So it's like a lot of campaigning against it, I've heard. And that seems to be, resonating again. We'll see what the polling actually shows in the end. But that's a big drop to go from 60 to 50 as far as, people that are for it. So it could happen, might not happen. Looking at the data, medical cannabis sales in Arkansas totaled almost 24 million in September. So, pretty decent there. At this pace, state's going to hit 265 million in sales this year. So there's a market here if they were to do it. But, yeah, I don't know. The home of Walmart here isn't going for it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was on the board of MPP, we would watch these things as they get the real action happens like in this period of time, the 2 weeks, as we've talked about, short attention span theater. And like, I remember when Nevada was up and Arizona was up and those two babies just like flipped. I mean, Arizona wasn't trending well, but it went really not well.
Nosedived, huh?
Yeah. And then Nevada was the surprise. We did not think that was going to end up passing, and it did, because Sheldon Adelson had done so much work to lobby against it. And when I was working on Proposition 64 in California, which hasn't the implementation of it was not, as intended when we were all working on it. But I remember making phone calls to voters to help to explain the issue. And I remember in the weeks leading right up to the election, there was still a lot of misinformation or disinformation around what it would mean to legalize cannabis. So you never know who's calling on the other side on these things.
Yeah. So speaking of states where it's not looking good at all, or maybe unknown, North Dakota. So North Dakota, there's no polling results. Couldn't be that hard. There's like 50 people there. Just pick up the phone.
I just think of Fargo.
Yeah, exactly. So,
geez,
the data we have to work off of is back in 2018. So in 2018, it was rejected by a vote of almost 60 to 40, 60 against. I think that back then it was a pretty loose framework, and this one's significantly tighter. I mean, by significantly tighter, they're going to allow a maximum of 7 cultivation facilities and 18 retailers. 1 for every person in North Dakota. Sorry, North Dakota listeners, but it's really not that many. And I feel like it's really tightly regulated versus what they proposed in 2018. So maybe that'll resonate, but given the fact that 60 were against and 40 were for back in 2018, I'd be surprised if this one went, but we don't have any polling results there.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
But Fargo, I mean, great movie, great show. Have you seen the FX show? It's fantastic.
I just think, what the heck do you mean?
There could be a great cannabis arc, if they
if
they had legal weed in a future season of Fargo. But South Dakota, the last but not least. So this one's not looking great either. I think in an October poll, 45% of voters back it, while 47 are against it, and 8 undecided. It's a little tight for me to say, hey, there's something here. And I don't really know, if this is like a non-commercialization. I don't know the framework for it. Frankly, I didn't do enough research, kind of given where it's landing on the state. But so for all the wins, maybe some losses coming as well, but it's not the first time it's happened in a Dakota.
So if I'm a gamble man by nature, which I am to an extent, I'm going Missouri and Maryland. Do you have a pick?
Oh, yeah. No, for sure. Those two. The big question I would say is Arkansas. And I'm going to say it's a no in Arkansas.
I'm going to say it's a no.
I mean, I'm usually the eternal optimist, and I don't, not trying to make it any worse, but just that polling trend doesn't look good. And that's Arkansas. They're interesting. Yeah, good.
It rains. That's bad news.
Arkansas made headlines, total aside, but did you see the Tyson Foods CFO was found in the wrong house, inebriated and arrested? Turns out they're based in Arkansas.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Tyson Foods invested in one of my little angel investments, which is a plant-based seafood company.
Well, that's cool. Divesting.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, they can legalize weed and then, he won't drink so much, won't end up in the wrong house.
Yeah, I have a feeling he's going to be on a breathalyzer for a little bit now, but we'll see what happens next. He won't wake up on some poor woman's couch. Can you imagine finding that guy? Oh, no, thank you.
Stranger than fiction, I swear. I think that's great. I think we're saying Maryland, Missouri, a no on Arkansas, and the Dakotas, no good. So we're gonna get what? We're gonna get 2 out of 5.
We're gonna get 2 out of 5, and
not bad.
No,
21 states with adult
21.
use.
And don't forget that everything can happen outside of elections too, like Connecticut, Rhode Island. There's things in the works
all the time.
And, of note, there are little things happening. Like within Ohio, there are 6 jurisdictions that are going to vote on decriminalizing cannabis. So there's everything down to that level that is happening during this election cycle. So we should, keep an eye out.
Lots going on.
Yeah, the Marijuana Moment is going to have an interactive tracker, I believe I saw from the update this morning. So let's all pay attention throughout the day to see what goes down.
Yeah, that's great. They're doing that. It really does make it easier because it is so hard to track all of these things. So should be an interesting day. But we'll see how it goes. But more and more states legalize, and that's the headline.
Thanks for listening to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset. For more information on Headset, Visit headset.io.